Good morning. It is Friday, September 26th. We are here with our friend Dash from Jubilee. Dash, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Chase, how you feeling today?
Good. Excited.
This is Chase's 8 a.m. as well, just so you know. He is currently in Georgia and it is actually 10, but he's usually up till like 3 or 4. So this is incredibly
8 a.m.
different.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
All right, so I wanted to, kind of step into current events, what's happening now. Jimmy Kimmel was just brought back on the air after being threatened by the FCC. What are your initial thoughts with what happened with Jimmy Kimmel? Do you see that this is a continuous trend? Because we kind of saw it with Stephen Colbert as well. His show is ending at the end of either this year or beginning of next year. So what are your thoughts on Trump and what the FCC is doing in terms of preventing mergers and where free speech is going?
Well, I think it's kind of a classic situation where there's like enough similarity between things that happened under a Biden presidency and what we're seeing now that conservatives won't be able to understand the nuance between them. You know, a person getting removed from Twitter for spreading anti-vaccine lies is the exact same thing in their mind as the president using an FCC chair to pressure Jimmy Kimmel to get fired. You know, those are not the same thing, but they see it as the same thing. And so there's definitely not going to be the uproar that we should see when the president and the actual government is taking these kind of efforts to silence political opponents and any kind of dissent in general. And it's really just like kind of horrifying to read through comment sections in response to this and to see just how how little conversation is being had about like how bad of a precedent this is to set for a government and a president and his administration to do something like this. You know, I don't, in our lifetimes, I don't think we've ever seen a president and their administration go to these lengths. And now that this line in the sand has been crossed, uh, it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, do you see this kind of veering over into social media and then starting to ban not only like large Democrat related accounts, but individual users as well? Because I mean, they are going after bigwigs right now, and I personally haven't seen any censorship of the smaller voices or anybody via social media yet. But can you see this happening? Because we're only 9 months into Trump's administration. And I think that that's what my fear is that he's starting with the big wigs right now. And it's going to be that much easier to take a step into social media and go after smaller voices next.
Yeah. I think we will definitely see more attempts get taken. I think we've definitely learned that anything that they can do, they're going to try and do, no matter how dirty of a playbook it might involve. The good thing, though, is, well, I guess a bad thing is we're definitely seeing that corporations and anybody who's solely profit, guided by profit motive, they have no spine. Like they will fully capitulate to any administration, no matter how evil or virtuous that administration might be.
Yeah.
Like if they feel like it's going to affect the bottom line, they will, gladly do whatever they need to do. The nice thing, though, is that we saw an immediate, response from Disney Plus subscribers and Hulu subscribers to the tune of $3 billion in a couple of days lost for Disney. Um, and what do you know? Jimmy Kimmel's back on the air. So it's like they might grow a spine in an opportunistic way when the people say, hey, we're not going to support you and give our money to you in any way, shape, or form if you don't stand for something. And so it's nice to see that like we still have some power as a collective with where we put our money and that we can get the corporations to not just completely capitulate and bend over for the administration. But he's definitely going to be taking a lot more measures in a lot of other snaky ways.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to see like everything that he's doing targeting all of these law firms included. Right now we're seeing him doing a lot with linear television in terms of preventing any mergers. The pay to play right now that he's doing with a lot of these companies, including Nvidia and AMD, saying
Yep.
like, he's getting a percentage of what's being actually for the sales to China. So it's like it's very concerning because like you can see just how involved this administration is getting, and this is the administration and the movement that says like they're all for the free market and capitalism, and I just feel like we're not actually seeing that. There's just an insane amount of government involvement, which is just scary to see. I kind of want to shift over to, I don't know if you were able to see the Charlie Kirk Memorial, see some of the things that happened in the Charlie Kirk Memorial, but you saw Elon Musk and Donald Trump shaking hands and seemingly getting along. Do you see them getting back together? I mean, Elon Musk made a pretty pretty big statement when he said that Donald Trump was in the Epstein files. I mean, that right there in itself sounds like he was insinuating that I mean, Donald Trump was himself a pedophile or, somebody that was involved very close with Jeffrey Epstein. So, do you see them getting back together? And do you see like where do you see them going from here?
I mean, I certainly hope not, because, when you see the richest man on the planet in cahoots with someone like Donald Trump at the start of his term, like that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because both of them have shown that they are both equally willing to apply rules for thee and not for me.
Yeah.
I think Elon Musk's original motive for buying Twitter was that he felt like a large communication platform like that shouldn't have any kind of political leaning. And that's the reason he bought it, to be some free speech champion. And then he ends up serving in an actual presidential administration. So clearly it's something where like, hey, I'm going to take up this banner for this cause, but then as soon as it benefits me, I'm going to go against it. As we're seeing with everything that Donald Trump does. And but the one like small comfort that I have just from like a psychological perspective, seeing someone like Trump, who's just such a textbook narcissist, um, partnering up with anyone is I know that the relationship is not sustainable. Like there, that kind of a relationship that, the biggest like technocrat, billionaire like Elon Musk partnering up with him, like that their interests will collide at a certain point and there will be a falling out. And so it's no surprise that that already happened. Apparently they're cordial. I really thank Elon Musk for kicking off the Epstein files debacle because, everything that's happening and people not, getting distracted from that is really great.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, the last thing that I heard is that over on his free speech platform, he's now deplatforming and stripping verifications away from a bunch of MAGA influencers. So I do not think that the happy wife, happy life between the two of them right now. Yeah, I don't think that they will make amends, and I hope it stays that way.
You know what's kind of crazy is I remember after there was like this big announcement that he was going to be involved with Doge. I knew that there was going to be stepping on feet, and I assumed I was like by next year because like I think that their original plan was to do Doge for about a year and a half until July. I think it was like July 4th, 2026 is when the estimated date of like when Doge would be dismantled, and that was
Mhm.
when they were going to have all of their cuts and the whole government efficiency thing. I remember thinking to myself after that was announced, I was like, I don't see them getting the full year and a half. I assumed that they would get into probably January, February of next year before they ended up breaking up, but they went so much faster than what I was expecting this year. And I think that's just the case for the entire Trump administration this year, right? Like we have seen this man go pedal to the floor this entire administration. I mean, he
Mhm.
immediately went with Doge cuts to passing the big beautiful bill to passing or signing all of these executive orders, dismantling DEI, going after universities because they had, some form of DEI. Now he's talking about not allowing the Washington Commanders to build a stadium in proper DC because he wants them to change the name back to the Redskins, which I
Mhm.
just, I mean, I look at that, I'm just like, what, I mean, what is going on?
Mhm.
But like, I just see all of these different things happening, and like this administration, do you feel like there's a sense of urgency with Donald Trump this time around? Because it seems like he has passed so many things, so many executive orders that have been challenged in court, and then fought um, all of these judges and have fought all of these organizations that are trying to push back, saying like, we need these employees. I mean, Doge ended up cutting employees that had the nuclear codes, and then had to immediately reach out and say like, hey, we need you guys to come back. Like, do you think that there's like a sense of urgency, and like, why do you think that is? Because it seems like everything's happened within 9 months.
Yeah, totally. I like this Trump administration, or this term is completely different from the last one.
Yeah.
Like the last one, definitely there were issues. There were a lot of things that we could complain about and look deeply on. But like I think already just in these first 7, 8 months, it's far worse than the totality of those 4 years. And I think a big part of that is because I guess I'm getting a little bit reductive here with just like the psychological view, but a person who can't take accountability, um, and they get told that they can't do something,
Hmm.
they thrash and they throw a fit and a tantrum. And I think that that's kind of what we're seeing here. Trump, was very close to going to prison. I mean, he was it 34 felonies?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, he was right on the brink of his political life, his life as a civilian being over. And so I think what we are currently seeing is a vendetta playing out through the power of the presidency in response to, him having to pay the piper, almost having to pay the piper. And so I think like we are seeing we're seeing revenge play out in a presidential term right now.
Yeah, and I just wish it's kind of interesting because like it's looking like he is trying to challenge the legality of the auto pen, saying like, all these people that got presidential pardons aren't actually qualified for presidential pardons because Biden didn't actually know what he was signing or didn't
Mhm.
sign it himself. And then now he has like those photos up in at the White House where it has every president. And I was kind of shocked that he put up Obama. I'm not gonna lie. I felt like
Yeah.
I feel like personally he has a bigger issue with Obama than he has with Biden. So him putting up that picture of Biden was just it was kind of interesting. But um,
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean,
go ahead.
Biden is the one who beat him in an election, though.
Yeah,
So it's like if we're talking about like the most fragile ego on the planet, it's like that's the person who actually dunked on him to some extent and made him lose. And as much as he denies it, I can definitely see why he will go to the grave with with just
the election denialism. Yeah.
yes, yeah, and hating Joe Biden.
Yeah, I have a question for you on that. Why? I mean, I looked at this year's or 2024's election versus 2020's election. President Trump got the same amount of votes, or basically the same amount of votes that he got this time as he did last time. But it looked
Mhm.
like the Democrats just didn't show up. What do you think was the biggest reason? Because I feel like I've heard a bunch of different things. It was she came in too late. We didn't know enough about her. She had a weird laugh. The Palestine is Israel issue. Like I felt like I heard like 100 different reasons. What do you think was the biggest contribution to why people didn't feel motivated to get out for Kamala this time around?
Well, I mean, there's definitely like a lot of answers to that, but just something that I kind of believe is that the right uh, is not accountable enough to anything, and the left is too accountable. And so what we see in the election is that there were some very legitimate complaints and problems that people had with Kamala Harris and the way that she became the candidate. And also, I mean, during Joe Biden's term, there was kind of a mishandling of a few different things,
Yeah.
including what's happening in Palestine. And so, even though the candidate switched over to Kamala Harris, who was the VP, she still very much bears the responsibility for that. And I think that even just those few things, even though they pale in comparison to 34 felonies, two impeachments, rape allegations, all sorts of all these crazy things, a mountain compared to the molehill. But unfortunately, I think that the voters on the left are so dialed in that they took umbrage with like those small things with I shouldn't say small, but with Biden's presidency and with Kamala Harris, and it was enough to just kind of make them indifferent to the vote. And so, like, I think that's what it was. I also just think that there's an internalized misogyny in our country that is not fully addressed. That is a big part of it. I mean, there's so many so many answers to this question, but yeah, I really I don't have one solid answer I could give.
Who do you think is going to lead the party in 2028? I'm very curious to who you think that will be right now. Say the election is come this November, a couple months. Who do you think right now would you absolutely vote for, or who do you think has the best chance of beating Donald Trump?
Well, yeah, that is tough because I think on the left we care about people whose values are like 100% dialed in, but I think we have to take a page out of the right's playbook and understand that coalescing is a more important thing
Yeah.
if we want to actually win elections, which means that you have to coexist with people who you only agree with 80%. And just because there's that 20%, which might feel like the biggest travesty on earth and make reactive people say, oh, Gavin Newsom is pure evil, which I see everywhere from people on the left. I think it needs to be Gavin Newsom because at this point, like he seems like he would have the power to build kind of a coalescence on the left before anyone else could.
I agree.
So it just depends if by 2028 the left is ready to be done with purity politics and they can kind of learn what it means to build a tent where you don't necessarily agree with everyone 100% that you are, becoming ride or dies with. Um, and that's a tough conversation, but it is playing out already. Like you're seeing it in spaces a lot, people calling out the purity politics and saying, hey, we don't need perfect right now. We just need like functional. We just need
Yeah.
something that can win an election. And at this point, like I would take any Republican over another Donald Trump. Like, give me anything over what we are currently seeing.
Yeah.
I am not a purity politics person at all.
Mhm.
Give me a Chris Christie over a Donald Trump, whoever.
Yeah.
And so personally, I see Gavin Newsom as like the strong contender because he's probably the most qualified person in the country as the governor of California. I mean, he has more power than anyone else other than like the president over, a commanding state like California. And he's also like he's fighting back in some way. I mean, even though it's so ridiculous and petty and silly,
I know.
it's doing a decent job of like actually starting to claw into the awareness of like moderates and conservatives who see him mirroring Trump's thing and
Yeah.
they go, "Oh yeah, this is kind of ridiculous." Um, so yeah, my bet, my hope, honestly, is with Gavin Newsom. But I know that a lot of people on the left, if they heard me say that, they're gonna immediately cast me off the page.
I actually agree with you.
Really?
I remember when Biden initially dropped out, I immediately said, you can ask Chase this. I was like, I hope Gavin Newsom steps in. And then they announced that it was going to be Kamala Harris. And like, I understood why, right? Like you saw all of the funding that went to, or the donations that went to Trump, to Biden. They could only be transferred over to Kamala. So like, there was this huge treasure chest that had to go to Kamala or no one else. So it was like a waste of money.
Right.
Like I understood why they went with Kamala, but I have been on the Newsom train for a while now because I felt like he was the best at are him and Pete Buttigieg are the best at messaging. Those two
Mhm.
are just like second to none when it comes to messaging. And then going on conservative, um, or having conversations with conservatives going on Fox News. You saw Gavin Newsom earlier this year bringing on Charlie Kirk, and then other individuals as well. Like those are the people that like I can see being able to at least talk to conservatives and like
Yeah.
share a message in which they're not getting dunked on or they're not like
Mhm.
they understand how to, pitch themselves. Uh,
Yeah. Could I make one note?
yeah,
As far as the efficiency of whoever that person might be, I think you've heard the horseshoe theory about the right and the left, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, Bernie Sanders very much strikes me as a person who's kind of at like that tip of the horseshoe, where a lot of conservatives like Bernie Sanders,
mhm,
and a lot of conservatives' ire of Democrats is the way that they saw Bernie Sanders get treated. And I think we're about to see that possibly happen again with Zoran Mamdani. And so I think two of the really big issues that whoever becomes the front runner for the left needs to fit the part for is being fairly elected and being who the people clearly want.
yeah,
Because if we have another Bernie Sanders situation happen, nobody from the right is going to come over. Nobody from the middle is going to come over. But then the second thing is, we're seeing this at a crazy rapid pace. I have a lot of friends and family who are MAGA, and it's like this long-term study that I do where I see which issues affect them and I see which ones don't. The 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 veil of pro-Israel stances is gone. Like I never would have thought that conservatives would ever let up on that,
yeah.
fully buying the Israel propaganda. But we are seeing that at a crazy rate. Even my most staunch MAGA friends are now realizing that like we are occupied kind of as a country and as like a government. And so whoever on the left becomes the front runner, it cannot be somebody who is towing the Israel line because that's not going to play well. And unfortunately, even though I love him, Pete Buttigieg has kind of screwed up his messaging recently about this. And so that worries me about his chances. And it worries me as just a liability about Gavin Newsom, where he stands, because I actually don't know off the top of my head. But I honestly think that Israel is going to be and our relationship with them is going to be a defining issue on both the right and the left in the next elections. So I think that's going to be the main thing.
Speaking of Israel, I know that you're about to have to go pretty soon, so I wanted to get one last question in
Sure.
and then chase with any questions that you might have.
And I've got time. I've got time.
Okay, perfect. Uh, you met Ben Shapiro. How was he as a person, like actually like being able to meet him behind the scenes? Was he like cordial? Was he nice? Was he like standoffish? Like how was that conversation with him?
I'll be very honest with you. Ben is a lovely person. I have a lot of respect for Ben. I used to be a conservative 10 plus years ago. It was the coming of Donald Trump that very much like pushed me far to the left.
Okay.
And so like I've read two of Ben Shapiro's books and I've been like a longtime follower of his. And he's someone who very similar to Charlie Kirk, where it's like take out your policy disagreements with this person. You have to respect how good they are at discourse and like their respect and that they are a champion of free speech and they're really ballsy. That's something that I love about those two. And that the left kind of struggles with is people who are just like willing to have hard conversations, tough debates. And then Ben Shapiro, this particular format for the Jubilee video was surrounded, which this isn't just like a one-on-one debate. This is one on 20. And these are 20 strangers assembled from around the country who are all like very smart in this case. Some of the surrounded videos, it's not the smartest people. But in this particular case, though, like I met all 20 of the people in the ring with me, very smart people. And Ben Shapiro to come in against 20 smart people who very much might have a lot of animosity towards him and a lot of negative feelings. And he was so pleasant.
Yeah.
Very, very just polite and talking to anyone that wanted to talk to him, just being respectful. His default was to be respectful. And then occasionally some people very much were contentious with him. And at that point, he might reflect some of that back.
Yeah.
He's not just going to take it on the cheek, but I was actually very, very impressed with who he was and kind of how he held himself, considering the hostile environment.
Yeah, I've actually heard other people say the same thing that they've met like Ben on the in the back, like off camera, and he was actually like really cordial, really nice person. So I've always been curious. Chase, any questions from you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess going off of that, do you feel like there's any lessons that can be learned from a Jubilee space to try and contend with our very a broad opinion base of like, how we interact with people? Like, is there any lessons you learned from that that you think we could apply to maybe going and get making politics not so chaotic and divisive?
Yeah, yeah. Here's the thing. This is a very tough conversation that I don't totally know how to address, but I think it's a very, very important one for anyone getting into the space. Um, trying to do what Jubilee does is the debate is on this issue, which is whether people should be platformed or not. This big conversation of like, don't use your platform to give these other people voices, or don't let these people on. And so this is part of that purity politics conversation a little bit. But there's some nuance, some like line of thinking we need to find on this, where we can say Ben Shapiro is a great person to have a debate with. Flat earthers, maybe not. And so that's the tough thing with Jubilee is like they are half trying to mature the dialogue, but then they're also half an entertainment company. And so we see them bringing on people who are just ridiculous. And we should not be platforming people in the Mehdi Hassan case who are just objective fascists. Like,
Yeah.
that's not a helpful conversation in any way. And they might say, well, the merit of their argument, like, we'll watch them fall on their face. No, like, those are not good ideas to have. But somebody like Ben Shapiro, I think, yes. And so that debate is like we need to find that middle ground of when is it a productive, good thing for both sides to come to the table and argue, and when is it not? And when should we not platform certain ideas? I don't have a great answer for that, but that very much seems like what we need to kind of establish as a society for these kind of conversations and content going forward.
Yeah, that sounds good. Um, I mean, other than that, I also think like from what you see,
Sorry, I'm
how
gonna close my blinds really quick.
you're good.
Getting blinded. Okay.
So how do you feel like obviously the our relationship with Israel is going to be I would assume a much more divisive issue in a 2028 cycle with Democrats. I'm sure there will be conversations with Republicans just from some of the conversations that they have, but it seems to be much more of a wedge issue for Democrats. How do you see that how do you see that playing out in the primaries, and also how do you see people responding? Like we already discussed kind of the Pete Buttigieg, kind of the really no answer to the policies. What do you think the right answer and the right way to kind of convey how the relationship between the two powers should be?
Oh, man, that's tough. Ooh,
Mm,
it's tough because what we've seen over the last 2 years is these debates play out about October 7th versus what's happening in Palestine. But like there's a lot of questions about October 7th in my mind. And there's always this like I'm trying to exercise discernment over what is propaganda and what isn't.
mhm.
And so unfortunately, like for me, if I had to just choose one metric to look at for a compass on this thing, it's APAC. And it's like if a politician is taking any money from what should be registered as a foreign lobby but isn't, I'm not going to listen to them. Like
Yeah.
I think that's like the safest rule that I would take on. And so I just think we need to have a tough conversation about following the money and then not listening to the people who have been found red-handed on this particular thing. And so somebody like Zoran Mamdani feels like a really good front runner on this issue because he clearly is not
Mm,
towing the Israel line, which I think we need kind of a North Star, like one or two good leaders to follow on this issue and not listen to the detractors who want to talk about Israel having a right to exist, whatever the hell that means. So yeah, it's a tough convo, but
mm,
that's kind of what I would look at. I would say follow the money and then
mm.
stop listening to certain people.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely like I think so much they focus on like your personal views of Israel, and I think so much of what we should look at is the way in which they kind of portray American interest in the region, right? It's like all through a lens of what's good for Israel and what benefits Israel. And I think that, Bibi Netanyahu basically almost acts like he owns America and kind
Mhm.
of, that dynamic. But I also think that, Israel doesn't have to be in this stagnant place, right? Like I feel like the way in which we talk about this, it's either you have to go completely pro-Palestine or whatever group you want to identify with, or pro-Israel, and it's like I don't know why we can't advocate for the best path for everybody, like
Mhm.
the most prosperous path for Palestine and Israel. And it just seems to me that, a lot of times we get caught up in personal feelings about states and things like that versus, the actual issues and people who are actually impacted by that on the ground.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah. I mean, what's really tough is like there were these conversations um, that we had had in the last, let's say, 10, 20, 30 years on what kind of a solution you can have in Israel. But at this point, like we've now crossed a line that I don't think a lot of those viable solutions, two-state solution type things, can happen. Like there is now like a vendetta and a crime that has been committed to a level that I don't know. Like coexistence is getting harder and harder by the day, and a path forward. And so I totally agree, that we should try and find what is best for both of them. And I think, unfortunately, that conversation is getting harder.
for sure. I mean, I think, some of the arguments that people even present when you discuss that is so far removed from the actual reality or, so influenced by propaganda in either way, I think, Um, and yeah, I think when you focus it on simply like it's always a conversation around the Jewish state or anti-Semitism. And it's like, in some ways, I think that's maybe even more anti-Semitic because it ties the state of Israel directly to, Judaism. And it's like Judaism's much more dynamic than a man-made state,
Totally.
right?
Hmm.
And I think, we don't do ourselves any favors when we kind of dip our toes into that and say, yeah, like let's have that conversation because it shouldn't even be about that, right? Like I
Hmm.
think all states are capable of great evils and perpetrating those evils. And in fact, they do. Almost all creations of nation states, you have to kind of pick and choose who fits that identity. And I think, just seeing the conversations, it doesn't look like anybody's quite stepped up in the way that I think, like you were saying, the Zoran Mamdanis and people like that, I think they're able to deliver it in a way that comes off very polished and as well as like, you know, showcasing like why they actually feel that way. I think that's
Hmm.
the biggest issue that sometimes we have that, we get into the conversation about why we feel those things and not necessarily where we're coming from, right?
Right.
Um, and I think just seeing more of that. I'm really interested in the primary for that.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think you're advocating kind of for like the moral guardrails that we need to have on this conversation, which is super important because I mean, I'm even guilty of like running away in these conversations with some kind of a point. So I think if that becomes the focus, the conversations will get a lot more productive. So I totally agree.
I didn't have anything specifically else about I mean, there's plenty to go on and talk about, I'm sure. As we see almost every week there's new things. Was there
Yeah.
anything that you particularly caught your attention this week, or something that you feel like we need to pay more attention to?
I mean, I don't know if it's just that I'm too far down a rabbit hole, but like a conversation about false flags, I think needs to be had at some point because, like we heard straight from Steve Bannon's mouth this whole strategy of flood the zone. I'm sure you feel the same way. I'm sure we all do, but like we are feeling that strategy where things are happening so fast that you can't even process or react or come up with a response to any of them because so many things are happening. And especially lately, as like the Epstein files keeps getting so close to being released, keep getting so close, and every single time something dramatic happens. Whether it be just these arbitrary tariffs that are placed on everybody, whether it's assassination, whether it's whatever. And as we're seeing Kash Patel completely shit the bed on like multiple things where nobody, even like the most loyal lemming conservatives, are not buying what they are putting out. Like we have to have a conversation about these things being manufactured, which that's a tough conversation, which normally has firmly been in the realm of conspiracy theorists. But now it's like, is anybody believing what is coming out about Tyler Robinson and the investigation behind Charlie Kirk? Like we're seeing Candace Owens start a crusades against Kash Patel.
All
Like we're
that.
seeing even the most like diehard, most influential people in the conservative space who are not buying it. Like I'm seeing the most traditionally masculine dudes ever on these like gun channels on YouTube going out and setting up recreations of like femur bones and ballistics gel, showing like what a 30-06 can do and can't do, and saying like what they're saying happened to Charlie did not happen. And my follow-up question to any of that doubt is, well, then what does that mean? Like if this wasn't Tyler Robinson or a lone gunman, what the hell does that mean? Like that is a conspiracy that
Yeah.
is crazy in like how broad and how terrifying it is. But like we are there, and I think these are conversations that surprisingly seem to be happening on the right now more than the left. And I don't, yeah, again, I don't have great answers here, but like that's one particular issue just from the last 2 weeks that it's a can of worms that's being opened that I am fascinated by and terrified by.
Yeah, I actually saw Candace Owens talking about that. I watched her episode. I want to say it was like either 2 days ago, maybe 3 days ago. And she was talking about how she had got in touch with the individual who recorded the guy on Tyler Robinson on the roof. And she was like she had to go through like four different people in order to get to him. And she was like, I need the actual person so that they could show me the metadata. And like the person that ended up filming him, like when he was filming him, apparently it was not more than 10 seconds afterwards that he ended up shooting Charlie Kirk and then running. And then she was asking all of these questions on like, did he really dismantle a gun while on the roof and then bring it down? And like, how much time would he have had when everybody else was like evacuating? That was before. And like, how he got so far away. And like, there was a bunch of different questions that even I know you're talking about the rabbit hole. I was like, usually I don't agree with Candace either, but like that was kind
Right.
of, there were like a couple of things that I was like, man, this investigation just doesn't sound good. But that also, I think the issue also could be that it's Kash Patel, right? Like he didn't even end up catching this guy. The guy's
Yeah.
father was the one that ended up calling it in, being like, hey, my son did this. It wasn't like, and that was only because his son admitted and said like, hey, I'll go in willingly. He could have, if he really wanted to, he could have escaped. He could have gotten far away and we never would have heard from him again. And like
Mhm.
there would have been all of these questions on who this individual is, and was he trans? Was he straight? Was he a liberal? Was like what was he? Um and I'm just very glad that they ended up finding him, because like there was, I mean, the fact that there was like HBCUs that were getting bomb threats immediately after four different HBCUs, I was just like,
Yep.
it's like this is insane. But you're right. I think a lot of that story, at least the way Candace presented it, definitely raised some questions for me. I'm not a big on conspiracy theories either, but like that was very interesting just to hear like her perspective on this, like rather than politics, because like I've heard her talk about like vaccine hesitancy, and like I've been super frustrated with that because my girlfriend is currently a doctor. My younger brother is in med school. He's about to finish med school next year. He's going to be a doctor next year. Like I have a lot of people in medicine in my family, and like they see the impacts of like vaccine hesitancy and like people, getting really sick, um, getting into the hospital. So like that's been, I've always had like a bit of contention with Candace Owens and like what she
Totally.
ended up spreading. But just seeing what she had to say about that was very fascinating.
Yeah. And at this point, like when we're looking at like the support and the base of Donald Trump and MAGA against kind of the those on the left, um, we need to realize that we're not dealing with like simple scoreboard issues, um, where it's simply like, hey, we're going to make a good argument for like a good pro-choice argument, and suddenly we win people over. Like that's not how the psychology of the current political landscape works. It's very much like a degree of brainwashing on both sides, totally. Um, but me personally, totally. I don't agree with most of what Candace Owens says, but I am more than happy to welcome her as a temporary ally if it means casting doubt um, onto Trump and his administration and getting the people in his base to believe it. Because they don't listen to us. They don't listen to Gavin Newsom. They don't listen to anyone on the left. They do listen to Candace. And they do listen to Charlie Kirk. And that's a big point that I've been trying to make recently is that like Charlie Kirk was a giant liability for actually affecting Trump's base and starting to siphon away his support by casting doubt on things like October 7th and the Epstein files. And so like there's nobody on the left getting assassinated that would have helped the right, but assassinating somebody who actually has influence over the base, um, it could stand to benefit the current administration, which it is. We are seeing Charlie Kirk's death get used. That wasn't a memorial service. That was the RNC. Like
Yeah,
that's what we just witnessed.
literally.
Um, and they're using his death to accelerate, their agenda, kind of being played out. And so I am more than happy, though, to welcome temporary allies on any one particular issue if it means that we can start to change minds over on the right. So, like Candace Owens, as long as she's talking about doubt on certain issues, like she can come hang out at my house if she wants to. And I think that's what coalescence is, where it's like it's okay to let's compartmentalize these issues and find where we have common ground on some, and then maybe we hate each other on others, but that's okay. But that's how I think we need to start furthering some of these conversations rather than it just being two sets of issues that will never affect each other. We need to see them start to break out into pieces. But that's just my take.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. It's funny that you said that because I remember when, we had a bunch of people on the left trying to convince Republicans that the election wasn't stolen. And in my mind, I was like, at the end of the day, if you looked at what happened in the Senate election in Georgia with Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, um, Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, was it the second? He was the Secretary of State, right, Chase? Was the one that ended up saying after they ended up winning the election for two Senate seats in Georgia, he said that the reason they ended up losing was because of hesitancy, voting hesitancy, and so like people were afraid that their vote didn't actually matter and that it didn't count, and so Donald Trump was in part to blame why Georgia ended up flipping two Senate seats to blue. And so
Mhm.
like I remember like immediately afterwards there was a lot of like conversation of the election isn't stolen, the election isn't stolen, just like if that is causing hesitancy, obviously, say that it's not true, give your reasons why, but don't argue that because like if they're going to suppress their own votes, let that fester and grow because like then people what is the point of going out and voting? What is the point of standing in line and putting it if at the end of the day, it's just that the election's going to be stolen. And Donald Trump started saying that originally in 2024 for the election. He was just like, he's like, Pennsylvania, it looks like it's already going to be stolen. And then all of a sudden he ends up winning Pennsylvania, and now the election isn't stolen. So I agree with you. I think that there are certain like conspiracy theories that should fester, that should grow, that should become things that like we allow to kind of become have their own mind, because like it does impact every base. It's the same thing with what's happening in Israel and Gaza. I think that that was in large part why Democrats ended up losing, was because Kamala couldn't give a good answer
Right.
herself, because she was like, yeah, I wouldn't change anything that Biden did. And I remember she said that, and
Yeah.
I thought to myself, I was like, that's a little rough, especially with ongoing situation. But yeah, so that, I mean, that's just my opinion. But is there anything else that you want to say before we go? And like I said, I know that you're about to have to leave, and we don't want to, keep you any further. We definitely want to have another conversation with you down the
Totally.
road. But is there anything else that you want to share with us? Anything on the top of your mind before we ended up going?
Um, Not for an audience, but just for the two of you. I think what you're doing, trying to create content like this is great. The more like strong, smart men that we can have on the left, the better. I guess that's another tough conversation, but as soon as like the left can actually start to make a little bit of space for men, which I know that's a tough conversation, but like I think it's really good for us to kind of carve out like an identity that young men can attach themselves to in the left, rather than just being told they're not allowed to have any kind of an identity. And so it's cool what you guys are doing. I think this is like awesome. I've loved everyone that I've met through Jubilee, and I really respect anybody who's trying to further these conversations. So yeah, props to you guys. Thanks for reaching out.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it, Dash. Like I said, we definitely want to have a conversation later down the road. Chase, I also appreciate you as always coming on, and I will see you guys later. Have a good day.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks,
Bye.
Chase. Thanks, Roland.
Thanks.
Bye.